Have you ever noticed that the strongest people rarely speak the loudest? They're not the ones constantly posting, performing, or proving something. They move through the world with a quiet presence, calm, collected, almost invisible, but not because they're weak. It's because they're rooted. In a world addicted to visibility, silence is an act of rebellion. We're told to put ourselves out there, to show our progress, to build a brand. But what if the most powerful thing you could do was not perform? What if real transformation doesn't begin with noise, but with stillness? There's a kind of power that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't seek applause or validation. It doesn't crave to be seen. It just is, grounded, quiet, unshakable. And when you encounter someone who embodies that presence, you feel it. You don't always know why, but it moves something in you. It resonates. The Stoics knew this well. Long before likes and follower counts, they taught that real strength isn't about impressing the world. It's about enduring it. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor with infinite influence, reminded himself daily not to act for recognition, but for virtue. Not to look strong, but to be strong. Today we've reversed that. We announce our goals before we've even begun. We document our healing before we've actually healed. We confuse attention with meaning. We mistake visibility for value. But here's the truth. The roots of greatness grow in silence. Think about a seed. You don't dig it up every day to prove it's growing. You water it. You nurture it. You give it space in the dark before it becomes anything worth showing. Inner strength is no different. It's not built through posts or performance. It's built in those quiet moments when no one is watching and no one is clapping. So today we begin a different kind of journey. This isn't a guide to becoming more popular, louder, or more seen. It's a return to the essential, a return to you. Maybe you're not tired because you're weak. Maybe you're tired because you've been spending so much energy trying to be seen and not enough trying to be still. Maybe your next breakthrough doesn't need more eyes. It needs deeper roots. In this video, we'll explore 12 Stoic principles, timeless truths that can help you build what I call silent inner power. The kind of power that doesn't need attention to exist. The kind that's quiet, but undeniable. So if you're tired of the noise and ready to stop performing and start becoming, welcome. This isn't an escape from the world. It's a return to yourself. Let's begin. Let silence be your foundation. We live in a world addicted to noise. Post it, announce it, declare your goals, broadcast your progress. These days, if you're not talking about what you're doing, some might wonder if you're doing anything at all. But the Stoics would offer a different perspective. They'd say, let silence be your foundation. Not because they believed in hiding, but because they understood something we've nearly forgotten. Real growth doesn't need to be seen to be real. And more often than not, the louder you talk about what you're building, the less time you spend actually building it. Here's a question worth asking. Have you ever shared a goal, getting in shape, launching a side hustle, writing that book, and felt a sudden rush of satisfaction just from saying it out loud? That little dopamine high feels good, right? But that feeling isn't progress. It's performance, and it's dangerous. Neuroscience confirms this. When we talk about our goals too early, especially in public, we get a dopamine hit that mimics accomplishment. But our brain feels rewarded before we've done the hard work. That false sense of success, it steals the fire we need to keep going. That's why silence matters. It protects your momentum. It creates a sacred buffer between your private intention and the world's gaze. It gives you room to stumble, to experiment, to fail in peace, and to grow for real. The Stoics didn't avoid words because they had nothing to say. They chose silence because they understood timing. They spoke when their words had been earned, when their actions already spoke louder. Think of silence like soil. It's not flashy, not loud, but beneath its surface, roots are digging deep, spreading wide, anchoring strength. You don't dig up a seed every day to prove it's growing. You water it quietly. You trust the process. We often do the opposite. We dig up our dreams too early, posting gym selfies after one workout, announcing a business before it's tested, sharing writing that's barely begun. Not because we're proud, but because we're afraid of being invisible. We confuse visibility with value. But what if we flipped the script? What if silence wasn't emptiness, but depth? What if not posting was an act of power? What if being unseen was exactly what you needed to become something real? Silence says, I'm not here to impress. I'm here to transform. I don't need to explain myself yet because I'm still becoming who I'm meant to be. And yes, silence can feel uncomfortable. It makes room for doubt, room for fear, room for honesty. But that's where true change happens, not in the noise, but in the stillness. So ask yourself, am I chasing approval or committing to mastery? Am I performing progress or living it? Because the strongest foundations are built in obscurity, brick by brick, quietly, consistently. And when silence is your foundation, you don't need applause. Your presence becomes your proof. So the next time you're tempted to post, to explain, to prove, pause. Hold the silence. Let it root you. Let it build you. Because when your work finally speaks, it will say everything, and you won't have to say a word. Speak less, do more. Have you ever told someone about a goal, felt fired up, and then lost momentum before you even started? It's a strange thing, isn't it? You speak the words, and for a moment it feels like progress. You feel lighter, almost proud. But days go by, and nothing happens. That dream, that plan, still just a sentence you said out loud. There's a reason for that. Modern neuroscience shows that when you talk about your goals, especially with excitement, your brain releases dopamine. It gives you a hit of satisfaction, a sense that you've already done something when you haven't done anything yet. The pressure that could have fueled action gets released in conversation. That's the trap. And that's why the Stoics practice silence, not as a form of hiding, but as a form of strength. They didn't speak of discipline, they lived it. They didn't declare their intentions, they embodied them. Because they knew this. Real progress doesn't crave an audience, it craves action. Look around. Our world is saturated with performance. Social media rewards you for sharing before doing. You post a gym selfie before breaking a sweat. You announce a business before it has a name. You share a quote about growth before you've faced anything painful. But here's the hard truth. Talking about it doesn't make it real. Only action does. There's a difference between someone who talks about the person they want to become and someone who shows up for that identity day after day, quietly without applause. So let me ask you, where are you leaking your power through words? What part of your life are you narrating instead of building? Because when you speak less and do more, something powerful shifts. You stop performing for approval and you start building for purpose. You stop trying to look committed and become committed. Think of the Stoic who trains in the background. No cameras, no audience, just repetition. They don't announce who they are. They prove it with how they live. And that's the challenge I want to offer you today. Can you hold your vision long enough to let it mature in silence? Can you stop seeking validation and start seeking results? I'm not saying never speak. I'm saying don't trade your energy for attention. Let your actions gather momentum. Let your identity shape in private. Let the work speak for itself, because when it does, it echoes far louder than any caption ever could. And one day, when someone asks, "How did you change so much?" you'll smile because you'll know the answer was built quietly through thousands of invisible, consistent, uncelebrated steps. That's not just stoicism. That's real power. So today, don't just talk about the path. Walk it, and let your silence carry more truth than 1,000 promises. Don't share the seed water. Every goal begins as a seed, small, fragile, full of potential but not yet real. And just like a seed, it doesn't need to be displayed. It needs to be protected, nurtured, given space to root in silence before the world ever sees it. But here's the problem. We live in a culture that tells us to announce everything the moment we think of it. New project? Post it. Fitness journey? Share it. Spiritual breakthrough? Turn it into a caption. We've been conditioned to believe that exposure equals accountability. That if we share our goals early, we'll feel more motivated to achieve them. But the truth? Most of the time, it does the opposite. When you share too soon, you invite the world's opinions before your vision is ready to stand. You open the door to doubt, distraction, and expectations when all your goal really needed was quiet space to grow. Think of it like this. If a gardener plants a seed, then digs it up every day to show people it's growing, what happens? It dies. Not from lack of sunlight, not from lack of care, but from too much exposure. The same thing happens to your goals. Early on, they're not strong enough to face the world. They don't need applause or advice. They need your discipline. They need your focus. They need your patience. The Stoics knew this. They didn't broadcast what they were working on. They weren't interested in impressing anyone. They were interested in becoming someone. Seneca once said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." And in this case, craving attention before you've done the work is what leaves you empty. When we share our ambitions too early, we get the reward before the result. That hit of validation, that little cheer from others, it feels good, but it kills hunger. It satisfies ego, and it weakens the inner drive we needed most. Let me ask you something personal. Is there a dream you've shared, but not followed through on? Did the attention you got in that moment replace the discipline you needed? You're not alone. I've done it too. We all have. Because it feels like progress, but it isn't. That's why this principle matters. If you're serious about building something real, whether it's a business, a better body, a new way of life, don't share the seed. Water it. Wake up early. Train when no one's watching. Work in silence. Study in solitude. Build without the world knowing. Because one day, people will notice. They'll ask, "When did you change?" And you'll smile because it happened long before they were watching. It happened in the quiet, in the dark, in the discipline no one saw. This isn't about secrecy, it's about respect. Respecting the process, respecting your vision, respecting the time it takes for something meaningful to take root. So before you share it, ask yourself, is this strong enough to withstand the wind of public opinion? Or does it still need the shelter of my private effort? Water your seed, and when it's ready, it won't need an announcement. It will bloom. Resist the dopamine of validation. Let me ask you a hard question. Are you doing it because it matters or because someone might like it? In today's world, it's easy to confuse the two. You write a post, you hit the gym, you finish a hard task, and before the dust settles, your hand's already reaching for your phone, waiting for a comment, a like, a "you're amazing." It feels good, right? That little rush, that hit of dopamine, it's addictive. But here's the catch. That feeling, it's also a trap. The more we chase validation, the less we hear our inner compass. The more we seek applause, the more we forget why we started in the first place. And slowly, almost invisibly, we stop building for meaning and start building for attention. But the Stoics warned us about this. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world at his time, wrote to himself every night, not to impress anyone, but to remind himself of what actually mattered. Not praise, not recognition, but purpose, integrity, inner peace. Because here's the truth. External praise might excite you, but it won't sustain you. You can't build long-term discipline on short-term applause. You can't stay grounded if you're always reaching for approval. Every time you check for feedback before you've finished the work, you're handing your self-worth over to strangers. You're trading purpose for performance. And slowly, the foundation beneath you begins to crack. Let me give you an example. A friend of mine trained for 6 months to run his first marathon. He kept it quiet. No posts, no countdown, no fanfare. He just trained, consistently, alone. The day after the race, he didn't post a selfie at the finish line. He didn't even wear the medal. When I asked why, he smiled and said, "I didn't run it for anyone else." That stuck with me. Because we live in a time where people share plans louder than others finish goals. And yet here he was, quiet, complete, content. That's the Stoic spirit. The Stoics weren't anti-recognition. They just didn't need it. They built from within. They found satisfaction in showing up, not showing off. So here's a perspective shift that might help. What if the real reward isn't the like, but the life you're shaping? What if the real dopamine hit came from progress, not praise? What if you chose to value effort over echo? Because when you rely on validation, you're always at the mercy of others. But when your fuel is internal, you become unstoppable. You wake up and train because it's who you are. You create because you must, not because someone claps. You live aligned, even if no one's watching. That's not just discipline. That's freedom. So today, take a breath and ask yourself, would you still do it if no one ever noticed? If the answer is yes, you're on the right path. And if it's no, that's your invitation to go deeper, to reconnect, to build your strength in silence, not in spotlight, because applause fades, but virtue endures. And in the end, the most powerful validation is knowing you didn't need any. Your work is not performance. There's a quiet danger in the way we approach self-growth today, and it's this. We start doing the right things, but for the wrong reasons. You eat clean, not because you're building discipline, but because it looks good on your Instagram story. You meditate not to find stillness, but to tell people you're spiritual. You chase progress, but only if someone's watching, and suddenly your life becomes a performance. You're not growing, you're acting, you're not transforming, you're curating. But here's what the Stoics understood, and what we desperately need to remember. Your work is not a show. Real growth doesn't need an audience. It needs effort. It needs consistency. It needs privacy. Seneca didn't journal to impress anyone. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations for the public. These were men at the top of power, emperors, philosophers, warriors, yet they kept their most powerful work internal, quiet, hidden. Why? Because true self-mastery isn't about appearing wise. It's about becoming it. And that journey, real, honest, gritty growth, isn't glamorous. It's often invisible. It happens in the unshared moments. The late-night thinking, the quiet morning walks, the difficult choices made with no one there to clap. So let me ask you something personal. Have you ever caught yourself doing something just for show? Have you ever posted your goals before you even started? Have you ever shared your healing before you really healed? It's okay. We all have. Because in a world that rewards performance, it's easy to forget that life is not a stage. But here's the thing. Every time you do something just to be seen, you chip away at your authenticity. You replace intention with impression. And slowly, without noticing, you become a version of yourself that's curated, but not true. The Stoic path? It asks something deeper. Not, what will people think of this? But is this aligned with my values, even if no one notices? That shift changes everything. When you stop performing and start living, you begin to build something real. Not for applause, not for likes, but for integrity. Your discipline becomes yours. Your habits become sacred. Your identity begins to evolve, not online, but within. And you know what happens then? Eventually, people will notice. Not because you told them, but because you've become someone who doesn't need to say a word. Your presence shifts. Your energy deepens. You become the kind of person who walks into a room and doesn't need to explain who they are, because it radiates from how they live. So today, ask yourself this. Are you building or are you performing? Because if you're building, keep going, even when no one's watching, even when no one says good job, even when the world's busy clapping for someone louder and flashier. Because in the end, the most powerful people aren't the ones who look the part. They're the ones who live it, quietly, consistently, and with deep purpose. And that kind of power, it can't be faked, it can't be posted, but it can be earned. Brick by brick, step by step, away from the spotlight, and closer to who you were meant to become. Anchor your discipline in solitude. Let me ask you something honest. Who are you when no one's watching? Not when you're being cheered on, not when someone's holding you accountable, but when you're completely alone, with no external pressure and no audience. Do you still show up? Because that's where true discipline lives. Anyone can be disciplined when there's a coach checking in. Anyone can stay consistent when the camera's rolling or the audience is clapping. But real strength, real inner power, that's forged in solitude. It's easy to post a routine. It's much harder to live it without applause. It's easy to start when someone's watching. It's harder to continue when no one cares but you. And this is what the Stoics understood better than most. They didn't need reminders. They didn't need accountability apps or check-in buddies. They had something stronger, a relationship with their own word. Marcus Aurelius, writing to himself in the dead of night, reminded himself, just that you do the right thing. The rest doesn't matter. No audience, no praise, just principle. Because here's what solitude does. It strips away everything external. And what you're left with is truth. Do you get up early when no one else sees it? Do you train, write, reflect, push? When there's zero reward in sight, that's when it counts the most. That's when you know it's real. You see, solitude is the forge. It's where the raw material of your will gets tested. If your habits only exist when they're being observed, they're not habits. They're performances. But if you can build discipline in silence, you become unstoppable because no setback can shake you. No lack of attention can derail you. No excuse can stand up to the mirror you face every morning. And that kind of power, it's rare. In a world that screams for attention, to be the person who quietly honors their path, that's extraordinary. Let me tell you about someone I knew. She trained for a triathlon, alone. No training group, no race day announcement, just early mornings, painful runs, silent swims, and solo bike rides. She said, if I can push myself in private, no public failure can break me. And she was right. When you anchor your discipline in solitude, you become resilient, not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. So here's the challenge. Can you do it without needing a pat on the back? Can you keep your word even when no one knows you made a promise? Can you be your own accountability? Because the truth is, there's no deeper strength than the kind that needs no witness. No greater victory than the one no one applauds but you. That's stoicism, not flashy, not loud, but unshakable. So tomorrow morning, when the alarm rings and no one's there to remind you, get up anyway. Not because someone's watching, but because you are. And that's all the reason you need. Detach from praise. Let's be honest. Praise feels good. A compliment, a round of applause, a comment that says, you're amazing. It lights something up inside of us. That little spark of being seen, acknowledged, appreciated. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying it. But the real danger is needing it. Because when your motivation depends on recognition, you're no longer guided by purpose. You're guided by applause. And that applause is a fickle god. One day they love you, the next day they scroll past. One post goes viral, the next one vanishes into silence. If your discipline lives or dies by the reaction of others, you'll spend your whole life chasing shadows. The Stoics warned us about this. They understood that external validation is never stable. It's outside your control. And to build something lasting, something grounded, you can't rely on it. Imagine a tree that only grows when the sun shines. The moment clouds roll in, it withers. Now imagine another tree. Its roots run deep. Rain or shine, it grows. That's the Stoic. They show up when no one claps. They continue when no one watches. They commit when no one says good job. And here's the paradox. The less you need praise, the more powerful your actions become. Because now your effort is pure, not a performance, not a plea for attention, but a reflection of who you are. Let me share something personal. Years ago, I wrote every morning, quietly, privately, for months. No blog, no audience, no plan to publish. Just me and the page. There was something sacred about it. I wasn't writing to impress. I was writing to understand, to grow, to listen to my own thoughts in silence. Ironically, the moment I stopped chasing feedback, that's when the clarity came. That's when the best ideas emerged, because I wasn't distracted by the noise of approval. So here's a question worth asking. If no one ever praised you again, would you still do the work? Would you still show up for your morning routine? Would you still write, train, build, create? Would you still grow if no one was there to say, wow? If the answer is yes, you're already free. But if the answer is no, maybe it's time to recalibrate. Detach from praise, not because it's evil, but because it's unstable. Don't build your identity on compliments. They're not bricks, they're bubbles. Build it on commitment, on values, on the quiet power of consistency. And here's the beauty. When you stop performing for others, you begin performing for yourself. You become the kind of person who shows up out of principle, not pressure, the kind of person who finds joy in the process, not just in the pat on the back. That's when you're truly dangerous, because now you're unshakable, you're rooted. You've become the kind of presence that doesn't beg for attention. You command respect by how you move through the world. So let them praise you. Let them ignore you. It doesn't matter. What matters is you and your quiet promise to keep showing up, no matter who's watching. Let results be your voice. You don't need to convince anyone, not with words, not with promises, not with posts, in a world where everyone is busy explaining themselves, shouting their goals, their hustle, their ambition. You can take a different path. Build quietly, work in silence, and let your results do the talking. Think about it. When was the last time you saw someone truly powerful brag about their power? They didn't, because they didn't need to. That's the Stoic way. No grand declarations, no dramatic announcements, just quiet discipline and undeniable results. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." In other words, stop explaining, start becoming. Too many people get stuck in the trap of talking. They say, I'm going to start a business. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to write a book. But all that talk creates an illusion of progress. And the more we talk, the less we do. Because words can be comforting, but action is what transforms. The Stoic approach is radically different. Don't broadcast the journey, just walk it, brick by brick, quietly, steadily, relentlessly. Because when you operate like that, something powerful happens. Your presence begins to speak louder than your voice. People notice the calm in your demeanor, the strength in your eyes, the groundedness in your choices. You don't need to tell them who you are. They feel it. And that kind of power, it can't be faked. I remember meeting a man years ago. He didn't say much, but everything about him carried weight. He didn't boast, didn't dominate the conversation. But when he did speak, you listened, because his life had done the work before his words even arrived. That's what happens when your results speak. They create a presence around you, a silent reputation, not based on marketing, but on substance. So here's a question worth asking yourself. Are you trying to be heard, or are you becoming undeniable? Because the first path is noisy, exhausting, and often empty. The second path is slower, but it's solid. It lasts. It's the path of mastery, and mastery is never loud. You won't hear it coming, but when it arrives, you feel it, and so does everyone else. So today, stop explaining yourself to people who haven't earned the right to understand you. Stop trying to prove your worth through words. Just do the work every day, quietly, without asking for applause. Because in the end, it's not the loudest that rise the highest. It's the most consistent, the most focused, the most disciplined. Let your results speak for you. Let your actions be your voice. And let your presence, rooted in quiet strength, be all the explanation anyone will ever need. Master your emotions before they master you. Let's be honest. Your emotions can either be your greatest ally or your most unpredictable enemy. You've probably had those moments. Your heart's racing, your face is burning, someone cuts you off in traffic, you read a comment that hits too close, or maybe something small spirals into a full-blown storm inside your mind. The emotion comes in fast and suddenly you're no longer in control. You're reacting, exploding, shutting down. Sound familiar? But here's what the Stoics believed. Emotions are natural, but they're not kings. They're visitors, not rulers. You feel them, but you don't obey them. That's a crucial distinction, because when emotions run your life, you're no longer making choices. You're just following impulses. Think about it. How many arguments have been started because of temporary anger? How many bad decisions were made in the heat of jealousy, fear, or ego? Emotions left unchecked become dictators, but when you master them, they become fuel. Seneca once said, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." That's not about suppression. It's about self-leadership. You see, mastering your emotions doesn't mean pretending you don't feel. It means developing the awareness to pause, to observe what you're feeling, question it, and then respond with clarity, not chaos. Let me give you an example. Imagine a firefighter entering a burning building. Their heart is pounding, their body's screaming run, but they don't panic. They're trained to move through the fire with intention. Emotion is there, but it doesn't lead. That's emotional mastery, not the absence of fear, but the ability to function through it. Now, how do we build that? Start with this. When emotion hits, pause. Don't react immediately. Breathe. Name it. Ask, why am I feeling this? Is this mine, or am I carrying someone else's energy? Does this reaction serve my highest values, or just my ego? That moment of reflection, that's where power is born, because now you've interrupted the autopilot. You've chosen to lead your emotions, not follow them. And over time, something changes inside you. You stop being easily provoked. You no longer live at the mercy of moods, news feeds, or other people's bad days. You become anchored. Your presence carries calm. Your actions hold weight. Because people can feel, you don't react like everyone else. That's stoicism, not the cold absence of emotion, but the warm presence of wisdom. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, ask yourself, am I reacting or am I responding? Am I a puppet or a captain? Emotions will always visit. That's part of being human. But whether they take the wheel, that's up to you. Be the one who feels deeply but chooses wisely. That's what makes you powerful. That's what makes you unshakable. No complaints, only adjustments. Let's be honest, complaining feels good in the moment. You get to vent, you get to blame, you feel justified, even righteous. But here's the problem. Complaining doesn't change anything. It doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't move you forward. It just keeps you stuck, burning fuel but going nowhere. The Stoics had a different approach. They believed in one powerful shift in mindset. Don't complain. Adjust. Think about it like this. Imagine a pilot flying through turbulence. She doesn't grab the mic and rant to the passengers about the weather. She makes adjustments, subtle course corrections, calm decisions, because that's what keeps the plane in the air. Now ask yourself, how often do you spend your energy narrating the turbulence instead of flying through it? Here's the truth. Life will hit you. Unexpected bills, broken plans, people letting you down. But complaining about reality doesn't change it. Responding to it does. Every setback is information. It's feedback. It's data you can use. The Stoics didn't see obstacles as punishments. They saw them as part of the path. Marcus Aurelius famously wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Let that sink in. Your complaint is a signal, not to scream louder, but to see clearer, to step back and ask, okay, what can I control here? What's the next best move I can make? Quietly, intentionally, effectively? Because movement beats noise every single time. And if you really look at the most resilient people you know, they're not the ones who whine. They're the ones who adapt. They shift. They adjust. They keep going without the emotional leakage. I've seen it in leaders, in parents, in people who've lost everything and built back brick by brick without broadcasting their pain. Not because they didn't feel it, but because they chose to focus on what they could do next. And you can too. Here's something you can try today. The next time you feel the urge to complain, pause. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, what's this trying to teach me? Then act, even if it's a small move. That pause, that shift, it's not weakness, it's power. It's you choosing adjustment over outburst, progress over pity, because in the end, your growth will not be measured by how loudly you expressed your frustration, but by how gracefully you turned pain into action. So don't waste your breath on blame. Don't narrate your limits. Just adjust and move forward, because that's what Stoic strength looks like. Not louder, just stronger, not bitter, just better. And most importantly, not stuck. Just quietly, steadily moving forward while the world makes noise. Own only what you can control. Here's a tough truth that most people resist. Much of what weighs you down was never yours to carry in the first place. Think about how often you hold on to things you can't control. Other people's opinions, their bad moods, their decisions, the weather, the economy, the algorithm, even the past, even the future. You carry it like a backpack filled with bricks, and you wonder why you're tired, overwhelmed, anxious. But the Stoics had a powerful rule of life. Only own what is truly yours. And what's yours? Your thoughts, your actions, your character, your effort. That's it. Everything else, it's not yours to own. And if it's not yours, why let it rent space in your mind? Now let me be clear, this isn't about apathy. It's not about ignoring problems or pretending life is easy. It's about clarity. Because when your energy is scattered across things you can't control, you have nothing left for the things you can. And that's how people lose momentum. They waste their emotional resources trying to rewrite someone else's script instead of mastering their own. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you lost sleep over something completely outside your control? An email that never came, a text you overanalyzed, a result you couldn't change. Now imagine if you had spent that same time refining your craft, or exercising, or journaling your values, or just sleeping, because that's productive too. See, the Stoic path isn't about suppressing care. It's about focusing it. It's about directing your concern toward what's effective. Epictetus said, some things are up to us, and some are not. It's simple. It's honest. It's liberating. So when life gets loud, when anxiety creeps in, pause. Ask yourself, is this within my control? If yes, act. If no, release. And this isn't a one-time shift. It's a daily discipline. Because distractions will always tempt you to micromanage what isn't yours, to chase closure from people who never gave you clarity, to fix things that were never your responsibility to begin with. But freedom, real freedom, comes when you stop chasing control and start choosing alignment. You begin to feel lighter, more focused. You stop trying to manage the storm, and instead you learn to steer your ship through it. So remember this, not everything that touches your life deserves to shape your peace. You don't need to carry the world. You just need to carry yourself wisely, quietly, and with purpose. Own what's yours. Let the rest fall away. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And that's the Stoic way. Live like no one is watching because they aren't. Here's a freeing realization most people learn too late in life. Nobody's really watching you, not the way you think they are. We spend so much energy polishing our image, filtering our actions, and editing ourselves for a crowd that's not even paying attention. But the Stoics knew better. They understood a truth that modern life has tried to bury under likes and views. The world is too distracted by its own reflection to constantly analyze yours. Think about it. Most people are consumed with their own insecurities, timelines, worries, and appearances. You're not the main character in their story. You're barely a passing thought. Now, at first, that might sound a little depressing, but actually, it's one of the most liberating truths you'll ever hear. Because if no one is really watching, you can stop performing. You can stop playing roles and chasing applause. You can finally start living with integrity, doing what's right, not what's popular. This is the Stoic path, to act not for recognition, but from conviction, to train your character when no one is clapping, to make the harder choice even when no one is watching. And let me tell you, it's in those quiet moments that your real power is built. When you go to the gym at 6 a.m., not to post it, but because it's who you are. When you say no to gossip, not to look noble, but because your principles matter. When you choose patience over pettiness, generosity over ego, growth over gratification. That's who you are becoming, not the person who poses well, but the person who shows up when it counts. The world might never see that, but you will, and that's enough. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one. Not perform like one, be one." And here's the paradox. The less you need to be seen, the more deeply you're respected. The quieter your strength, the longer it lasts. So here's your invitation. Step off the stage. Stop waiting for the spotlight. Live with intention, not for inspection. Because real fulfillment doesn't come from being admired. It comes from being aligned with your values, your vision, your virtue. Live like no one is watching, because most of the time, they aren't, but you are. And that's the only audience that truly matters. Inner strength doesn't seek applause. So let's pause for a moment and take a breath. Because what you've just heard isn't philosophy for the bookshelf. It's not theory for the classroom. It's a toolkit for life. These 12 Stoic principles are not about sounding wise. They're about becoming wise. They're for the moments when life gets loud, when your ego wants to shout, when the world says, "Look at me," but your soul whispers, "Just be." And here's the heart of it. Inner strength doesn't seek applause. It doesn't crave the stage, the spotlight, or the social proof. It doesn't need validation to move forward. Because when you stop performing, you finally start progressing. When you don't need to talk about your goals, you begin to walk toward them. When your worth isn't tied to how many people are watching, you become unshakable because your focus turns inward. This is the way of the Stoic. Quiet, grounded, consistent, powerful, and yes, maybe no one will see your early mornings. Maybe no one will know the battles you fought in silence, the patience you practiced, the temptations you resisted, the values you honored. But that's not the point, because the reward for this path isn't applause. It's alignment with your values, with your highest self, with a rhythm of life that builds something real. So let your results speak. Let your rhythm lead. Let your silence grow into strength so steady it doesn't need to be explained. People will wonder how you're so calm, how you keep moving when others crumble, how you shine without ever asking to be seen. And the answer will always be the same. You stopped performing. You started living. You chose purpose over performance, stillness over noise, discipline over dopamine, growth over glory. That's the path. That's the power. That's the point. So as you close this video, don't just think about these ideas, live them. Make them habits, make them your identity. Because when you do, you don't just become stronger, you become unshakable. And that's something no applause can give you, and no silence can take away. Until next time, stay intentional, stay silent, stay powerful.